Um, yeah, I think I could see myself getting into it a little bit more if I had a regular group of guys to play with,
Hmm.
a group of friends, I guess I should say. But I don't know. I never found myself getting into the MMOs, even though I know that I could sink a lot of time into them. I don't think I would have ever been really fulfilled by them.
Yeah.
Um, I really do prefer a more immersive story or a a singular narrative experience, even
Hmm.
if it's not a particularly good story. I like beginnings and endings. I'm not too interested in just missions, although I mean, I still enjoy, although I haven't played an RTS in a really long time. But those are the same thing every time. It's not like that
Hmm.
changes. You just build your army and go kill the guy with the other army.
Yeah.
Um, but that's direct competition, and that's a different style of game. I haven't played any of the PvP stuff, player versus player. Not particularly interested in it
Hmm.
unless I had a group of friends that I knew I was playing with.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know. I have a really difficult time seeing the same 10-year plan that Bungie sees. Because right now, if I didn't pick up the game again, I wouldn't miss it. Um, I played it for somewhere between 15 and 20 hours. I'm already at level 15. If if it only takes so long to max out to level 20, then everything else is equipment or subclass
Hmm.
progression. I mean, you have to have the next expansion out by December because you stop you stop leveling, you stop
Yeah.
and there's nothing to explore. You don't there's not like a giant world for you to just go out and be in like Skyrim or even to a certain
Right.
extent World of Warcraft. It's all mission based. You fly through those missions because it's like when a new MMO comes out and in 3 days someone's like made it to the level cap. You're like, all right, but everybody else playing at a normal rate is going to take months to get there,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, or a year, or even longer than that.
Hmm.
Whereas I played fairly casually, even if it was for a long period of time. Like 15 to 20 hours is not much time to sink into a game that is expected to last for 20 years,
Yeah.
or I'm sorry, for 10 years. So it'll be necessary for them to release expansion packs on a regular basis, and you'll end up sinking a lot more than $60 into the game. And of course, I mean, in addition to $60 for the game and then 30 for probably each expansion, you're also paying 50 a year for PlayStation Plus, and that can um, or 60 for Xbox Live, and that'll pay for itself pretty readily with
Hmm.
the games you get each month and all the other good stuff that comes with it. So those
Right.
are absolutely worth that cost, but that is in addition to all the same, um, plus all the time that you put into it. And if that's what people who like MMOs like, and they like playing these repetitive missions, they just like going out and raiding with their friends and
Hmm.
sifting through a sparse amount of loot, then yeah, that's going to be your kind of game. Um, but yeah, for me, I guess I'm more like your boss, where I want that experience of a story or an arc. Um, and even though the gameplay is really good, it's not enough for me to keep playing the same thing over and over again
Hmm.
for any longer than what I've already done. Even though I'm not at the level cap, I don't. Like I said, after that one encounter with the dude in the chains, when I went to play the mission after that, I wasn't as engaged any longer.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and just overall, it really feels like a half effort. I think my biggest trouble is that every new world just feels like it's got a different coat of paint on it. All the enemies just feel like they're named something differently and animated slightly differently, but they even have the same AI from Halo. I recognize.
Which is awesome AI though.
I mean, it was good AI, but I'm fighting the same enemies I've been fighting for the past 14 years.
Yeah, the little guys that you kind of pick off, the big guys that are smarter, and then the bigger guys that have shields and bigger weapons. But
Yep.
I don't know. I guess because I think Halo 1 and probably therefore 3 and 2 at the same time have some of like the best just enemy AI and like first person shooters ever. Like every single time they retreat from me and hide behind like a crate or like a wall or something like that and wait for me to get close and do all these really cool smart things. Like they blow my mind because I'm used to so many other shooters where like the guys just stand there, like shooting gallery style, or they just like rush you, and like I love that they do different things. But yeah.
You know what Destiny's missing? It's missing the charm of those characters. In Halo,
True. Yeah.
there were the little guys that you'd see, and they're like, "It's him!" and then they'd run away.
Yeah.
Or they're like, "He's getting close," or they'd scream, and they would react. Then they would react to you. Or the big guys, they'd grumble a lot. They get really angry. Like, it actually felt like you were fighting an enemy, whereas these feel like you're fighting robots, and sometimes they are robots. But it really feels like I'm dealing with an algorithm, whereas in Halo, they at least gave it a little bit of charm, and they gave the enemies fear, or they gave them frustration. They made them characters.
Yeah, unfortunately, this game compared to Halo, like for example, with Halo, and maybe it was because the gaming industry was at a very different point back then, and video game development and stuff like that, and companies weren't as public about what goes on there and how they make games and whatnot. But when you play Halo, it was like you were on the ring, and you were a part of that world, both in single player, probably single player, not multiplayer, but like whereas Destiny, because like you're saying, the enemies don't have like the same personality and aren't really as memorable in any single way. It doesn't feel like you versus this world that was obliterated by these alien threats, involved in this mystery you're supposedly trying to uncover. It feels like you were saying, versus Bungie's algorithms. And you're like, okay, so it's like you go on a really hard strike mission, or like now they've released the Vault of Glass, which is the first, I think, level 26 to 28 six-man raid. And it's not another piece of this universe they've created. It's Bungie put these polygons together with this coat of paint and made it really, really hard, and let's see if we can beat it, so that when we do, we can tweet Bungie, "Hey, we beat this part of your game,"
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I just I have a hard time seeing it lasting 10 years. 10 years is a long time. Like World of Warcraft lasted 10 years. And that was a phenomenon. I guess some people were still playing Final Fantasy 13, was it? Even as recently as a couple of years ago. But it was nowhere near the scale. And I even have a hard time seeing it financially reasonable for Bungie to support the game for that long.
Yeah. I wonder if some part of them pictured people latching onto it in a much different way than they have. I remember when I was telling you about the barbecue I went to with the guy's name is Mike. He's actually in our clan, who's like really into Bungie games and the lore that they put into like their Halo titles and stuff like that. And he was saying that Bungie had described this game world, as having a Lord of the Rings caliber of lore underneath it all and fueling it all and stuff like that. And unfortunately, it almost seems like so many parts of this game's presentation have been misstepped upon, that all of that goes away. The second I start kind of like giggling to myself and yawning and shaking my head at like Dinklage's voice acting and some of the other parts of the game that sort of detract from an otherwise immersive experience, the second that Lord of the Rings claim kind of goes out the door. Like I said, I don't like that I have to go on Bungie.net to read grimoire cards to indulge in the lore. Like, why the hell can't I do that from the game,
Yeah, that's really unnecessary. It's extremely cumbersome.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's a lot about the game that's cumbersome in general. But yeah, that's kind of obnoxious. The game should be the game. And if you choose to go outside the game and bring a clan in, and from outside, like even you said, you can't edit your clan from within the game.
Yeah.
Like, specifically makes you step away from the game to go deal with the game, and that's I don't know, that's really clunky.
And I have a keyboard hooked up to my PlayStation 4, like for sending, like you can do these things. I don't know if it has mouse support, but even because of the interface of the game itself, like we were saying, with the thumbstick being a mouse pointer, like it's irrelevant.
Why
I have
wouldn't you
that
be able
controller and a keyboard hooked up. Why can't I? Should otherwise I can do anything,
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah, it's another half thought there.
Yeah, and that's
if
what
the game's really supposed to be 10 years long, like why not make all that stuff accessible from the game?
Yeah, I don't want to sound or repeat anything that the negative vocal minority online tend to say about this game. Like obviously, in the grand scheme of a $500 budget, there's all sorts of things that are being paid for, and we probably don't even know what 5% of those are. A good chunk of it's going to be marketing, but when you look at how a budget for this type of game is similar to the budget of a Skyrim, like caliber of game, and you look at the amount of content in the game and in the way that world looks and the way it sort of is this single-player MMO-style game. And I say MMO, obviously there's nothing multiplayer about it, but it just makes you wonder where the money went to in this game, because you can see it in Skyrim, in that game's complexities and the characters you can talk to. I mean, like, heck, even in
the skill trees.
Yeah, even in Borderlands, which I think Destiny both fairly and unfairly gets compared to quite often. Like in Borderlands, you get to certain parts of the world of Pandora where they're populated with characters running shops or sitting outside of their houses or things like that. Like the tower in Destiny has the bare bones, like minimum, no personality version of those exact things, except they are only located in one part of this game. Like, how cool, along with all of your other ideas for different gravity and acid rain and these things, would it have been to run into an abandoned space station on a moon and actually have a character there that was alive that you could talk with and get missions from? And it's like they've created this world, this game world, that has been so devastated by these alien threats that, like we were saying earlier, there's really nothing interesting to do in them anymore. Like.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Not to sum it up in one word, but I mean the game lacks charm.
Yeah, it does.
It lacks affectations. I mean, I brought up Borderlands first, but you brought it up just now. Like, you've got these shopkeepers who are all over the map, and you can get different things at different places, and they each have their own character. But not only that, but the characters themselves behind the counter are not only different people, but they're funny and they're weird.
Oh yeah. Like,
and they're characters themselves. They don't just look different, and they don't just sell different things, but they are different people.
Like in Borderlands, like a combination of kind of like 1 and 2, just off the like the top of my head. Like in 2, you've got like Moxie running the bar. I forget if she's in Borderlands 1 or whatever, and she's crazy over the top. In Borderlands 1, that first time that you meet Zed, and he's just like hacking apart a body, and the blood splatters on him and stuff like that. It's so like. And then very early on in Borderlands 1, you walk out a little bit from that. I mean, whatever, Claptrap aside, you walk out to one of the first areas in the game, and there's that guy sitting in his chair, and he's kind of like a hillbilly, and he's got his like shotgun, and he sends you on quests, and like Destiny doesn't have any of that.
No, and it's a good thing you brought up Claptrap too. Claptrap is adorable and obnoxious.
Yeah.
And that's great. Like, it's funny to have a character who's both really annoying and really silly.
Yeah.
Whereas Ghost, by Peter Dinklage, they gave him some kind of silly dialogue, like, "Oh, well, at least he's chained down."
Oh yeah.
It's such a limp execution, and not only that, but I don't really quite know what he means. Like, yeah, I guess I fought a couple of those ogre guys beforehand, but he wasn't chained down for all that long, And on top of that, I had it happen where I was playing the game, and it was long after he had come unchained that suddenly that line of dialogue triggered. And so it was like I was in the middle of the room, like trying to take him down. He was stomping at me, throwing his balefire out of his face or whatever, and then I hear Peter Dinklage go, "Well, at least he's chained down." was like, what?
Oh,
Are you
weird.
kidding me?
Like they program that to coincide with a time limit versus the triggering of the actual event or not triggering, you know?
I mean, it might have just gotten a little mixed up, but it was like,
Yeah.
it just emphasized how ineffective that line was from the beginning.
Yeah.
And then every now and then you'll be like, oh, well, don't blame me for you being crazy or something like that. It's like, guys, get a better screenwriter. Like, make these lines really
Mm-hmm.
funny. Because, like, Claptrap, I can't remember anything off the top of my head, but, you know, he's just got one ridiculous line after another, and it leaves you
Mm-hmm.
scratching your head going, that is just the strangest thing for you to have said right now.
Yeah.
And it's funny.
Yeah, and even with Claptrap, you know, like you, I might not be able to remember any of his probably like 300 one-liners, but in your head, you can remember the execution of all of them and the tone of voice and that personality, and it's a very fond memory. When people remember Ghost, they're gonna remember this dry, confused, bored sound, unfortunately. and in that you make me kind of like go back to like a previous point with however Dinklage was or wasn't being directed for this performance. It's like I really want to know when he initially recorded those lines because like you were saying in regards to the well at least he's chained down remark, it's almost as if he was sitting there in a voiceover booth and they didn't even have concept art to
Yeah.
show him yet, or they didn't even know, was it going to be a hulking enemy, a small enemy, like that stuff. They're like, there's going to be like a bad guy there is going to be there, and people are going to have to start shooting him and have trouble with him. And he was just kind of like, okay.
Yeah. And some of it, too, has to do with like concept art makes a really big difference because then you get a sense for the size and the scale of the enemy, and then he can look at it and go, oh, he's a really big enemy, and if I say it toned down, I might be undercutting that impact, you know? Like,
Right,
so it's very
right.
likely that he was missing the importance
So
of,
many pieces of the puzzle,
yeah, yeah. It
but
was
but
like, yeah, if it had just been
sporadically.
like, yeah, I don't know. Yeah. Weird. And yeah, it still only adds up to like a half effort or a diluted second half,
hmm
something along those lines. And because we know Peter Dinklage is capable of being charismatic,
Oh yeah.
there's no issue there. I just think he was, yeah, I think your point is still valid. Like it came down to direction. You know, the director didn't know the tone of the game, or the tone of the game changed, and we were left with either having to pay him all over again to come in and re-record,
hmm
or bad direction.
Yeah, there was a really good voice acting documentary on Netflix that Gina and I watched recently. I think it's called I Know That Voice. Um, all
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
sorts of people from, like Looney Tunes cartoons to anime to stuff you see on Cartoon Netflix, everything. And one of the things they were saying, and I guess it goes without saying, is that there's a big difference between being able to be a voice actor or a character actor versus just like on-screen stuff, even in stuff as highly regarded as like HBO. Just the way to approach it is completely different, and I almost got hit with that feeling of not to disrespect Peter Dinklage whatsoever, because I do think he's brilliant in Game of Thrones and he's really good in some other roles, but almost like he wasn't prepared for how different having to deliver those two different experiences was going to be from the kind of acting he was used to doing, you know?
It's a completely different experience. You
Yeah.
have to sell with your voice way more.
Yeah.
You can't rely on the animators always to sell what you're saying.
Right.
And also, sometimes the animators go off of your voice.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
it's really complicated. So you have to bring everything of that character to the room. And sure, sometimes they have previs for you, and you can see, you can get the gist for how the scene will look. But I remember there was quite a bit of controversy, at least amongst a certain community of people, that once Disney started hiring celebrities to do voices in movies, the rest of the voice acting world was a little upset because they were like, the regular celebrities are good performers, but they don't know the difference between stage performance where they have their body in addition to their voice to emote
Yeah.
versus just their voice.
Yeah.
It's not a different skill set, it's a different focus. And And so some people are really good at it. Like just off the top of my head, Robin Williams is the genie.
Mm-hmm.
Nailed it.
Yeah.
Because he just has all that energy. But there are other people. It's like there's no reason to get a celebrity with their name attached to this project other than to just attract viewers. It doesn't necessarily make the movie better.
Yeah, I think also that sometimes producers and voiceover directors often forget how distracting a familiar voice can be in an experience like this. Like when like we're just like we always say, we're hearing Peter Dinklage. We're not hearing, I don't know who does Claptrap's voice. I mean, granted, it's like altered and stuff like that. Like for example, what was that? It was the live action adaptation of Where the Wild Things Are, the movie by Spike Jonze, and I love it, and I think it's a brilliant film overall and stuff like that. But when I watched it, I just heard James Gandolfini's voice. I didn't,
Interesting.
That sort of thing, and it happens in all sort of things. But unfortunately, Destiny is one of those games where you just forever are going to hear Peter Dinklage of House Lannister, probably. Unfortunately.
Yeah, even if he's not doing his British accent.
Yeah, and no digital altercation or what they ended up doing, to make his voice sound a little bit more robotic at the end, is going to change that, and it didn't.
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed out, like, sometimes familiar voice can be distracting. This is just a little obscure, but I noticed Lance Reddick's voice. Do you know Lance Reddick?
No, but I do know Nathan Fillion, and I hear his voice and everything, and he's in Destiny also.
Yeah. Lance Reddick's from The Wire. He played Lieutenant Daniels.
Okay.
And he's got a very recognizable voice, and it's immediately evident that it's him.
Yeah.
And it makes me think, too, and I love Nathan Fillion, and I don't mind seeing or hearing him anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I particularly loved him in Joss Whedon's Much Ado About Nothing.
Yeah, we watched that. That was really good.
He was great. Everybody was really good. But I don't think celebrity voices sell video games the way that they sell movies.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody, especially in a game like Destiny, I don't think anybody bought the game because they were glad Peter Dinklage was going to be in it. A different game, they might have been very glad to see him or to hear him. But I don't think a game like Destiny sold because they had Nathan Fillion, although maybe Nathan Fillion, but Lance Reddick, like, they didn't need to pay so much money to these voice actors because Destiny, based on Bungie's reputation, should have been able to sell without that. Mm-hmm. And then that would have helped cut their budget back a little bit too.
Yeah. Or if they were going to have familiar voices, they should have completely changed like the vibe of the game. I'm not saying they should have gone like Borderlands whatsoever, but they should have made a game where they were saying like this is just meant to be really fun because it does handle really fun and not be as serious. Because every single time, like my buddy Nick and I are going on a mission and it's like Nathan Fillion telling us like what the mission objective is, we both say like, all right, Roger, Captain Reynolds, like Firefly references and stuff like that because that's what happens. And I don't think it's because like we're jaded a-hole gamers or whatever and don't want to take the lore of this game seriously. It's because it's fun and it's funny and it's just like I don't know if that's what they intended, but that's what they ended up with,
Yeah. Well, also, there's no point in getting Peter Dinklage, paying him all that money, forcing him to record so many lines to get him to play a non-character.
Yeah, that's true.
Right? Like, get him to play Claptrap. Get him to play an excited, fun role, because then you've got him really engaging with the material, and that will pull people in. But if you call him up to have him record, well, this was your idea, not mine. It's like, thanks for all of the 80s action movies one-liners.
Yeah. It's like at some point they called Mark Hamill into Batman the Animated Series to play the Joker, not Luke Skywalker.
Right. Actually, that's a great example. Batman Arkham Asylum made a big difference to get Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill to do their respective roles.
Yeah.
Because people love Batman the Animated Series.
Mm-hmm.
I do. So it was a great callback to that with a new aesthetic, great gameplay, gorgeous graphics, and dynamic mission structure.
Yeah.
Despite it being a really linear game, it was a dynamic experience.
Yeah.
So having the celebrity voices for Arkham Asylum helped because it pulled you into some sort of familiar territory,
Mm-hmm.
while also pulling that familiarity apart and creating a new Batman world, which was great. There's nothing like that in Destiny, though.
Yeah. Even I mean, just to cite other recent like science fiction games and stuff like that, to bring Mass Effect up again. Just like as
Sure.
it's a giant sci-fi role-playing action experience. I mean, I'm sure there are some familiar voices in there, but like overall, the direction that each one of those actors received in that game was to the caliber of which there's not really anything that pulls you out of it. I mean, whether you like female Shepard versus male Shepard's voice acting and stuff like that, it's like a whole different thing. But like overall, the entire cast of that game is in character, knows what they're talking about, sounds like they know what they're talking about, and therefore sells the immersion of that world on a scale that with the same amount of budget, Destiny just could not do, despite it sounding like that was their intent. And if that was their intent, then unfortunately they failed fairly miserably.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really good point. Destiny sacrificed immersion for celebrity appeal.
Mm-hmm.
They sacrificed immersion for scale. For a lot of other, I mean, I don't really know what I get in exchange for lack of immersion.
You don't. Okay, so in this case, I think I can answer you. For lack of immersion, you get a potential multiplayer experience with friends where you run around, throw grenades at things while cracking jokes and drinking Coca-Cola.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you get.
Sure. But I was doing that back with Counter-Strike.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
So there you go.
Like, I'm not saying that ceased to be fun, but it has ceased to be unique.
Yeah.
I don't feel like Destiny's a unique enough game to warrant more of the same. I'm glad other people enjoy it. I don't think it's a black scar on the face of video gaming, but it's outside of. I don't think it progresses the game industry, and it's not of my interest. So.
Yeah. For me, it's doing barely enough of something new, which also happens to be something that I'm not currently playing or experiencing on any other platform or any other game to keep me engaged and keep me looking forward to more. Like, it's one of those games where, like, as of right now, I am going to get the DLC, and I'm really excited about like leveling up and maxing out my armor set and kind of like raiding and seeing what content they're going to provide to players day to day outside of big DLC packs and stuff like that. But at the same time, man, I wish there was a demo out there or something like that, because it's sort of risky just recommending it on a grand scale, you know?
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. All right. Well, I think we've exhausted all of our points. I think we did a good job. We're at 2.5 hours, which is pretty long, but I think this was meant to be a lengthy conversation. I think with this much of a game in our hands, I think it's worth really picking it apart, and I'm pretty happy with the way this turned out. But rather than just cut it off cold, do you want to cool down? Maybe talk about something else for a little bit?
Oh, yeah, sure. I think what I can do... You mean like just between you and I?
Or the recording, whatever.
Oh, okay.
So I was thinking, if we've still got people listening after 2.5 hours, maybe just some sort of lighter chat, like what else you're currently playing or what else you're looking forward to in the coming weeks.
Okay, yeah. So let's like verbally cut it off right here. But like while we have a broadcast going on, if anybody's interested, we'll treat it as like a Easter egg of sorts, I guess.
Okay.
All right,
Sounds
cool.
good.
Okay, so if you listened this long into the Destiny podcast or jumped around and made your way here, whatever it is.
Thank you for staying this long.
Yeah, thank you for staying. In regards to all things, I don't even know how to wrap that up. Yeah, we listen to Destiny. I like it.
Please join the conversation on the website, because it's not over, and I enjoy respective contrasting opinions. So
Yeah. So we'll have this up on 30andnerdy.com. I think our YouTube channel is like youtube.com/30andnerdy. 30 spelled out in all places. We have our Facebook page also. If you want to join our Destiny clan, you can go to Bungie.net and search for Guardian Section 9. 9 is just the number. And like really right now we're accepting everybody and anybody. We've got all sorts of people. Actually, we don't have all sorts of people. We have like 10 people in our clan right now. But we are playing right now primarily on PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. We don't have any. Actually, I think we have one PS3 person, and like somebody was gonna play on Xbox 360, and when they found out that like nobody else was, they went out and got an Amazon credit card with no interest and got an Xbox One.
That's hilarious.
Anyways, point being that we're about fun and shenanigans. Guardian Section 9.